Stuka Joe here, and before we start with turn 2 of the playthrough, 2 corrections to what happened in turn 1. At 9:20, I subtracted 2 military support points for Tolliver's move from zone to zone, and the rules here are ambiguous as to this type of movement. At 4.24, it states that it costs 2 MSPs, while at 7.4.1, the same movement using strategic movement only cost 1. So I will credit the rebels with 1 MSP. At 15:20, in the combat situation involving Strong's command, the Union won and inflicted 9 casualty points on the Confederates. However, I eliminated 2 full-strength rebel units and reduced the surviving one for a total of 15 casualty points. So to correct this, I will flip all 3 units to their reduced sides to reflect 9 casualty points. And I want to thank my viewers for such great and quick feedback, which allows me to correct the game before I film the next episode. So now, on to the intro. Stuka Joe here. I've been filming this playthrough series of A Gate of Hell. And I'm filming as I'm playing for the first time. And it's taking me sometimes more than one day to film an episode. And it's not because I don't have enough time or I'm having trouble editing and it takes a lot of time. It's because I've been having trouble with some of the rules in the game, which I'm trying to wrap my head around. And it's happened that I've played the game, filmed the whole turn, only to realize that I screw up some particular rules, so I had to scrap all that video and go again. And I just filmed turn number 4, and these are the positions at the end of turn number 4. And I've noticed that I've been playing the game wrong as to certain aspects, and I'm glad that I found out, because if you remember, I think in turn 2, the Union took Fort Wagner out, and it was very easy to do. And I thought to myself, it shouldn't be that easy. And it has to do with the activation system that this game has. This game uses military support points. It's like a currency to denote resources that the sides have. And the game has an MSP determination and allocation phase. You determine the number of MSPs available for each side by rolling on this table here, right? And you see from the table that it is slanted towards the Union, and it makes sense. The Union had more resources. So the most that Confederates can get in a turn is 4. The Union can get 5, and that's if it rolls a 6. But you may think that you have enough MSPs to go about, and you don't, because normally you have to use MSP to place units in command so that in the operations phase they can undertake actions, and those actions also cost MSPs. So let's say that the Confederates rolled a 2 in the MSP table, they only get 2 MSPs. And if they want to move any unit during the operations phase, they would have to first place that unit in command. Like, for example, placing here Tolliver's units in command. And what confused me was the way the rules were written. I was thinking that in this game you place units in command, and it's really you place areas in command, and the units that are in the areas are in command. Let me show you. Here you have rule 4.2. You spend 1 MSP during the allocation phase to allow all units of a formation or up to 5 naval units and or independent ground units to be in command and activate during the operations phase. So I read this and I was under the impression that you place units in command. And what called my attention even more to the way I was playing it, which was wrong, was the concept of activation. Okay, look at rule 5.1. Okay, only units that have been put in command in the previous phase can be activated and perform actions during the operations phase. That's fine, no problem with that. And a player can activate during his or her portion of the impulse one of the following. And then it says up to 5 units in one area or zone of one formation. Like, for example, we could activate Tolliver in L18, 5 units of one formation in one area. And then it says that you mark those units with a command -1 marker when they have completed their actions. You can also, instead of activating 5 units of one formation in one area, look how it reads 5.1.2. Up to 5 naval units or 4 ground units of differing formations or independent units. Note that it doesn't say in one area. So I read this as to mean I can activate 4 ground units in different areas, and I missed 5.1.6 that says any units to be activated, whether for the first or second time, must be in the same area. So I completely missed that. And I'm not blaming the rules for it. I missed it. It would have been, of course, good to have the phrase in the same area here in 5.1.2. But the fact is that I missed it, and it makes a huge difference in the game. Another rule that I had trouble with understanding was the importance of entrenchments. Not only in ground combat, which I had no problem understanding that, but entrenchments in relation to the movement of Union units through amphibious movement. The Union has a number of brigades that begin the game off-map on these zone boxes, and they can be brought to the game by amphibious movement. And a unit conducting amphibious movement starts moving from one of these sea areas. And the unit from the sea area can move into river areas like R1 here, then R2, and let's say R3. The only thing that stops this riverine movement, this riverine amphibious movement, is a Confederate fort in an adjacent land area. But you see there in L13, there's no Confederate fort, or rebel ground units in a land area with an entrenchment, like in L13. So if there was another brigade moving through amphibious movement, reaching R3, that brigade would have to land in an adjacent land area. Well, it could not land here in L13 because of stacking limitations. It would have to land here in John's Island. But that's an example of how entrenchments can halt Union amphibious movement. Now, ironclads are a different story. Ironclads are only halted by obstruction / possible mine counters like the ones you see there, a Confederate ironclad or a fort in an adjacent area. Let's turn back our attention to R1. So if the Union sent a group of ironclads through riverine movement through R1, R2, in R3 they would not have to stop because the entrenched Confederates don't stop ironclads. Only forts stop ironclads and other ironclads and obstructions, of course. So if an ironclad enters R3, note here that R3 is adjacent to L18 here. And L18 has a fort, so the ironclad would have to stop right here, and it could bombard the fort, and the fort, if activated, could bombard the ironclad. So ironclads are only stopped by forts, obstructions, and other ironclads. Meanwhile, Union amphibious troops can be stopped by any of the above, plus Confederate units in entrenchments. But of course, the ironclads cannot occupy areas, land areas. Only ground units can do that. And to win, at the end of turn 11, the Union has to control 4 of the 7, let's call them key areas. Let's take a look at them. Here you see L19, which is adjacent to Fort Pemberton. So the Union practically has to go through Fort Pemberton, or L15, to reach that area. Then here in Morris Island, there's L5, which is the area that starts the game with Fort Wagner there. And adjacent to L5, across the river, is L17. And then the other areas can be reached by going through the gauntlet of minefield and obstruction and Confederate ironclads in Charleston Harbor. And you have Fort Sumter, which is an area which is treated as a land and sea area at the same time. And then you have L40, which is Moultrieville, which starts with entrenched Confederates and Fort Moultrie. So a lot of nasty surprises in Charleston Harbor. And then you have Fort Pinckney in L34. So we've covered 6 of the 7 areas. The last key area is not even an area, it's one of these off-map zones, which is the one for the 3rd and 4th districts. And to reach those zones, well, you see the arrows there. You got to exit the map through these arrows. So that's even a longer road for the Union. So the Union, to win, has to control 4 of these, what we call key areas. Now, the Union can reduce the number of areas to control in order to win if they successfully place this marker, the Swamp Angel, which was a huge parrot gun that the Union used to bombard Charleston. And this particular counter has to be placed within 3 areas of Charleston. So here we have Charleston, L32. S is a C area, so it'll be 1, 2, 3. It could be an L22. It could be an L19. It could be an L20. You got Charleston again. You got 1, 2, 3. It can be placed here in L15, but you catch my drift. It's basically one of these areas here close to the harbor. So the Union has to push through the swamps here and reach those areas, L15, L16, and place the Swamp Angel. And then the Swamp Angel, there's a pretty good chance in the random events table that it can break down, and if it breaks down, you don't get that bonus, so you still have to capture 4 areas. So if you're playing the Confederate side, you want to slow down the advance of the Union through the swamp in the direction of Fort Pemberton. You don't want to give up any areas where they can place the Swamp Angel. At the same time, you want to make the advance of the Union through Charleston Harbor as costly as possible. So you may want to place more mines there, and these cost also additional MSPs. But of course, as a Confederate, you won't have enough MSPs to do what you want. And even as the Union player, you won't either. So the Confederate player must, at the beginning of the game, set up his units in a way that he takes maximum advantage of the entrenchment markers. And these markers can be placed at the beginning of the game. Many of the units, brigades that are placed on the map, can also be placed with 3, 4, or even 5 points of entrenchments. So you can spread your entrenchments out and, let's say, place one here and place units there. That would stop the advance of amphibious units and force them either to attack L9 or have to move to an adjacent area. So you want to be able to slow down the Union advance, especially through amphibious movement, which is so powerful. So I did not really take that into consideration when I set up the game originally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the game, and I'm going to place the units again, the setup, and we'll take a closer look at the setup and why units are placed where they are. And we'll play turn 1. Now, turn 1 is a special turn in this game because all units in turn 1 are deemed to be in command. So you don't spend any MSPs to place them in command. And the Union starts with 5 MSPs and the Confederates with 6. So it's a turn that a lot happens. And the Union has the burden of attack here. Why? Because at the beginning of turn 3, Strong's brigade, that's the brigade that has the famous 54th Regiment that assaulted Fort Wagner in the movie Glory, that whole brigade may have to leave the game. It's either that brigade or Davis's brigade, the one brigade that has the least amount of reduced units. So you may lose your strongest brigade, which in the game for the Union, it's Strong's brigade, very easily and early on. And then in the 4th turn, the Union receives a brigade as a reinforcement, but so do the Confederates, and the Confederates can flip 4 units that are reduced to full strength. So the Confederates get an injection of energy here in the 4th turn. So the Union has to do as much as it can to try to wither the Confederate forces during these first 3 turns of the game. And the other reason to do so at the beginning of the game is that this table here, when the Union rolls 1 or 2 with 2 MSPs, there's very little the Union can do in a regular turn. 3 MSPs, also, there's very little you can do. So the time is running against the Union in this game, and the Confederates only have to make the Union advance costly enough and slow them down to win. So I'll be setting up the game and we'll play turn 1. And just to let you know why I wanted to make a video on this game, it had been on my list for a long time for various reasons. First, the topic. This is, I think, the only game on the campaign to take Charleston in 1863 by the Union. I haven't seen any other game, and it's not just another Civil War campaign or battles. It's a series of battles, and it's a land and naval campaign, which makes it even more interesting. So you have the interplay of land forces with naval forces, bombardments of ironclads. You got the amphibious movement by the Union, but then you have the gauntlet of defenses of Charleston Harbor that the Union will probably not be able to run away from, and will have to probably venture in the harbor to see what happens. So that's always interesting. The other reason it's an area impulse game, and I really like area impulse games because they're very interactive. There's not a lot of dead time. You play your impulse, then I play my impulse. And then this game has also elements of uncertainty with the roll on the MSP table, which creates a lot of tension there because you don't know how many MSPs you're going to get. And of course, you have the sunset die roll to end the current operations phase, and I like games that have also that element of uncertainty, because that even places a higher premium and a higher pressure level on the side that has the onus of attack. In this case, it's the Union. So let's set the game up, and we'll explain as we set it up, because in the setup you get options as to where to place units, and we'll explain why we place the units in the spaces that we do. So let's first clear the map. I've cleared the map, and you only see units in areas that begin the game per the setup in those specific areas. So the players don't have any discretion of setting them up in any other place. The only Union forces that begin the game on the map are the brigades of Howell, and Howell begins in L2 with an entrenchment 2 marker, and then you have Vodge's brigade in L3 with an entrenchment 1 marker. The remaining Union naval and land units begin in off-map zones. Here you see the Union brigades that begin in the off-map zone titled the Islands. And you have 2 of them, which are Davis's and Stevenson's brigade, that begin with a -2 committed marker, meaning that you can't activate them at all in the first turn. The Union can activate Strong's and Chatfield's brigade, and of course these will enter the map through amphibious movement. The Union begins with 9 ironclads, all in the Port Royal box. The Confederates do not have any ground units on the map, with the exception of forts. You see here on the west side of the map, in area L18, Fort Pemberton. On the east side of the map, near L3, where you have Vodge's brigade, there is fort in L4, which is the lighthouse fort. And then you have L5 that has Fort Wagner. And here you see Fort Sumter, and Fort Sumter is in a space that is a sea and land space at the same time. There can be naval units and there can be land units there too. And you see there in L40 another fort, Fort Moultrie. And L40 is, together with Fort Sumter, these are key areas. Then nearing Charleston, we see here in L34 Fort Pinckney, and we see there the city of Charleston. The Confederates begin with 6 forts, and these forts can conduct bombardment on adjacent land and sea areas. These forts can be damaged and they can be destroyed. The Confederates can use MSPs to rebuild the forts. The Union can even build new forts. And we'll start with Hagood's brigade. It consists of 3 cavalry and 2 infantry units, and it can set up in 1 to 6 particular areas on the map, and we will denote those areas with these small posts. So here we see the general area of Hagood's setup. It includes here Kiowa Island, and then it has these areas to the west of the river that you see here. And Hagood only has 5 units, and the brigade begins the game unentrenched. There's no trenches, and in this game, to construct trenches, you have to spend an MSP, and in any area where you have 5 combat factors, you can construct a trench. Now, Hagood's command has 5 units, and you need 5 combat factors to construct an entrenchment. So you would have to pair up one of these cavalry units with one of these infantry units. So Hagood could construct entrenchments in 2 areas. Of course, this is going to cost 2 MSPs, but the Confederates begin the turn with 6 MSPs. So we are going to select 3 areas where we place Hagood's command, and 2 of these will be constructing entrenchments. Now, of course, L1 is one of those areas because entrenchments with Confederate units will stop the movement of amphibious units. that enter this river here, moving up to Fort Ferguson. So we will place one of Hagood's cavalry and infantry units there with a total combined combat factor of 5. Now we will place another group of units here in L24, because if the first group is destroyed, you have a second group that will halt Union amphibious movement. So we place that second pair of units there, and we have this unit remaining. We could place it in another area, but it wouldn't do anything in way of stopping Union units that are using amphibious movement. So it is better if we use it to beef up the defense of one of these areas, because in this game you add 1 for each other unit that you have in addition to the lead unit in defense. And we will place that unit here in Kiowa Island. The next brigade to be placed is Simonton's Brigade, composed of 4 infantry and 1 cavalry unit. It begins the game in any of 10 areas and with entrenchment levels of up to 5. So you can place 5 of these areas with an entrenchment level 1 area, or 1 with a 2 and 3 with a 1, however combination you want. But it's only 5 units, but you have 5 entrenchment points. Now here you see the possible areas where we can place Simonton's Brigade. And something that you can easily overlook in this game, as happened to me, is again the importance of riverine amphibious movement. The Union can bring its units through the river here in R6 and continue moving, and even disembark here in L16, which is right next to L17, which is a key area, or even here in L6, which is adjacent to Fort Wagner. So Simonton's Brigade can be used to place its units with entrenchment markers. And here is a decision to make as to how many entrenchment markers you want to place. You can place up to 5 in 5 different areas, but of course each of those areas is going to have 1 unit in them. So it's going to be a weak area to defend, but at least it'll stop the Union troops coming in from the sea. And note also that the rivers also connect here with R9. So Simonton can be placed here in L8 to stop any Union movement into R9. So you see that L8 is an important space here because it affects riverine movement into R9 as well as riverine movement into R7. R7 extends up to this boundary here. So you know that L8 is one of those areas where we want to place units in trenches. So for now we place a 3 combat factor strength unit with a level 1 trench there. The other area that we want to stop riverine movement is here in L11, because a trench in L11 has a double effect. It affects riverine movement into R6, but also into R2. So here Simonton can help Hogwood to stop Union movement up the river in the direction of Fort Pemberton. So for now we'll place another 3 strength unit with a level 1 entrenchment there. We still have 3 more units to place. And you are probably wondering, Joe, don't spread Simonton's units too far away from each other because they won't be able to join again and be a considerable force. Well, there's another rule that I overlooked and I've never used in the playthrough, which addresses that problem. And that is the regroup rule, which allows all the units of one formation, like Simonton, regardless of location, to activate and relocate to any control or even contested zone or area as long as one of the formation's units does not move. And of course the limitation is that units that so relocate, you cannot use them to launch an assault. So that means that if we deploy one of Simonton's units here in L17, which is a key area, there may come a time when we activate Simonton for a regroup action, and let's say that we want to regroup them all to L8. That unit can be relocated to L8 together with any other Simonton unit that is not in L8, as long as the Simonton unit in L8 does not move. So regrouping will cost an MSP to conduct and also to place Simonton units in command, another MSP, but it will get the job done of reuniting all of his command in one turn. So we have 3 units to set up, and we will place a unit in L12. Why? Because L12 is one of those areas that stops riverine movement in 2 rivers. In the river here, in R2, any amphibious movement into R2 has to stop, as well as any amphibious movement into R6, in case L11 has fallen to Union troops. So we place an infantry unit with a combat factor of 2 and a level 1 entrenchment. We still have 2 units to place and 2 points of entrenchments. Now in this game, the Union moves first, and you see there in L3, the Union has Vodge's brigade that can march easily 2 areas into L8 and probably wipe out Simonton's units there, just 1 unit with an entrenchment value of 1. And the same thing you have here, Howell's command, but Howell's command won't reach R8 in 1 move, but it could be that the Union activates Howell twice during the first turn. And if it does, it attacks with a -1 because it will have a committed -1 marker. So what I'm trying to say is that it's maybe a good idea to reinforce L8 so it can survive at least 1 turn of attack, because L8, as again I stated, stops riverine movement in 2 different rivers. So we place an infantry unit with a combat strength of 3, and now I also place another entrenchment point. So we have a 2-level entrenchment in L8 with 2 Confederate units, and those units can absorb up to 12 casualty points. Every time you flip a unit to its reduced side, it's 3. So these can absorb up to 12. So that should withstand at least 1 turn of attacks. And we still have the cavalry unit with a combat strength of 2 to place. And we have the option of reinforcing L8 even more, or reinforcing these areas here. And in the supposition that the Union will invade first this river before Haggard can construct trenches in L1. So the first line of defense would be L11. We place the cavalry unit there, and we increase the entrenchment marker to level 2. And that's the setup of Simonton's brigade. The next brigade to set up is Graham's brigade with 2 infantry and 1 cavalry unit, and it has 3 points of entrenchments, and it can set up in 1, 2, or 3 areas, all in Morris Island. And Morris Island is one of the key areas in this game because it has Fort Wagner and Area L5 that is one of the objectives, and it also has the lighthouse fort. So you have 2 fortifications there that should help any defense from an amphibious attack. The downside is that Graham's command is only 3 units strong. Now, with only 3 points of entrenchment available, that means that the maximum of one of these areas in terms of entrenchment levels is 2. And so we can choose one area that we want to entrench with a level 2 entrenchment, and that will be L4. And L4 also stops riverine movement into R9. So we place an entrenchment level 2 marker and 1 infantry unit there for now. Now we still have 2 units to place and 1 point of entrenchments. And of course the obvious area where to set it up is L5. It's an objective or key area. So we place one infantry unit and a level 1 entrenchment. That area has the benefit of the fort, which is a +4 in defense for the Confederates. So we have one unit left. Do we place it in L4 or L5? And I will place it in L5 because I think by placing it in L4, it invites a Union amphibious assault in the first turn on Fort Wagner. And now in L4, the Confederates can absorb up to 6 casualty points, in L5 up to 12. And this setup situation of Graham's brigade in Morris Island, of course, is one of those situations that there's not a right answer, I suppose. You can argue for beefing up more L4 than L5 or vice versa. So we're going with the setup that you see here. The next Confederate brigade to set up is that of Cates, and it starts with 3 units and 4 points of entrenchments, and it can set up in 1 or up to 7 areas on the map. These areas are in the northeast corner of the map. You see Moultrieville there, and you also see L37 with Mount Pleasant. So these are pretty removed areas. The only way the Union can reach them is by moving through S6 and S7 and risking the mines and obstructions there. And we'll place all 3 units and 2 levels of entrenchment, which is the maximum that each area allows, in the area that houses Fort Moultrie, which is in that corner the only key area. Next is 2 independent units, Charleston Garrison and the 5th South Carolina. These can be placed in either Charleston or L34. L34 is an objective in this game, so we will place the Charleston Garrison there and the cavalry unit in area L32, which is Charleston proper. Now we place the mines and obstruction counters and the dummies and the 2 Confederate ironclads, the Palmetto State and the Chicora. Because this is a solo play, I just mixed all the counters, 14, and set them in pairs, 2 counters, without knowing what they are, and I placed them face down in areas S7 through 12, and also the Fort Sumter area, which is also a harbor area. And to complete the setup, we place the advantage marker on the Union box. The Union starts with the advantage, and in this game, if you don't use the advantage during your turn, it passes to your opponent for the next turn. And if you use it, it passes anyway. So you have to use it or lose it. And in the first turn of the game, by special rule, the Union starts with 5 MSPs and the Confederates with 6. And all the units and formations that do not have a yellow -2 committed marker are automatically in command. So each of the sides does not have to spend an MSP to place units in command so that they can be activated in the operations phase. All units without these yellow markers are in command. So the first turn is a pretty busy turn because the Union has 5 MSPs and the Confederates 6, and they don't have to pay to place units in command. They pay these points during the operations phase. And here is where we end this setup video. After resetting the game, and we will start again with turn 1 in the next episode of A Gate of Hell. So, this is Stuka Joe, signing off for now. Thanks for watching.